So tell us what you're doing.
So what this is a homemade sourdough starter.
Okay.
And you start out with bread and flour, and then you let it sit for a while, and then the yeast in the air kind of starts the culture. And then you just let it sit, and it bubbles, and it becomes alive. And then you feed it like once a week or every couple of days. And the new flour and water gives it new food, and it eats the sugars and the flour, and it creates carbon dioxide, making it bubbly and kind of alive. And then every couple of days I take it and I take out 75 grams of it and I throw out the rest. And then to the 75 grams of the starter, I add 150 grams of equal parts all-purpose flour and wheat flour, and then 150 grams of water. And then I mix it all together, and then I can let it sit for a couple days. And then whenever I want to use this for baking bread, I feed it once in the morning and then once at night, and it makes the sourdough very active.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can use it to bake bread. So instead of using yeast, I can take a little bit of my sourdough starter,
Mm-hmm.
and I can add it to a bunch of flour and a bunch of water, and then it'll rise naturally. You don't have to use commercial yeast.
Oh.
And because the leaven is something that's been like culturing for a while, it develops a lot of flavor and
Yeah.
a lot of depth, and it has like a sour
Taste.
sourdough earthy flavor. So you can create very flavorful bread and use very few ingredients, which is, I think, is like very fascinating because you start with so little and then you end with so much.
Oh, nice.
So very excited.
And you don't have to buy yeast as often?
No, you basically just use the yeast that's like all around us,
Oh.
and then you can do any types of bread with this. You can
Yeah.
do a sourdough bread, or you can do like a whole wheat bread. You can sprout grains and fold grains into the bread. You can do like a honey bread. There's like so many possibilities when you start with like simple ingredients and just add a little bit of whatever you like.
Yeah, make some bread this weekend. Oh, yeah, you're working. Okay.
Yeah.
You're gonna make some tonight then.
Yeah, I'm gonna start it, see what I can do. And then later in the week, I can have homemade bread, and I won't even have to worry about it because I'll have like the yeast already, and then
Yeah.
I'll just add more flour and more water, and then I'll be good to go.
Yeah, you have a bread for the whole week.
Yeah, and what's really good about like homemade bread is although it kind of goes stale pretty quick if you leave it at room temperature, if you bake a couple loaves of bread and you stick them in the freezer, then you can like reheat them in the oven, and it's like having fresh bread whenever you want.
Or if you freeze it.
Yeah, so that's what I usually do. I'll make like a bunch of bread, and then I'll bake it off, and as soon as it's like cooled, I'll like pop it in the freezer in an airtight bag. And then like if I'm ever super hungry, I can take it out, put it in the oven, homemade
And
bread.
at what point do you freeze them after you cook it?
Pretty much as soon as it cools.
Down, okay.
Like, don't want to let it sit too long, because the longer it sits at room temperature, like, obviously it starts
It will
to,
get
like,
dry.
Yeah, it gets kind of dry. But you can even freeze dough before you're going to bake it, but since I always have this, like, starter in the fridge, I can pretty much bake bread whenever I want.
That's nice. You definitely have enough flour there.
Yeah, so much flour.
You may as well use it.
Right. So excited. I can show you a picture of this is the starter that I had in the fridge.
Oh, that's a good idea to show me.
You can see how it's all bubbly,
Yeah.
and that's like all the fresh yeast in it.
It will get big? No, that's just what you add to the
This is
dough.
like the concentrated yeast.
Okay.
So like when you bake bread,
Uh-huh.
you take about just like this much, like a spoonful, like a tablespoon,
And you put it in the mix.
and you put it in a mix of like flour and water and like a little bit of salt.
And
then
this is made of yeast?
This is just flour and water, and like the yeast from the air, it like
Oh, it will
cultures
go in there?
It's like fermentation, kind of like when they bake.
Natural
Yeah,
fermentation.
natural fermentation. So it has like all like that good bacteria in it, which is like really good for
So
your
you
stomach.
don't need really to put any yeast.
Yeah, no, you don't need to add any yeast. You can use just this.
Just this, I
Yeah.
see.
So it's like a very good way to like not have to rely on like commercial products and packaging and stuff like that.
No, good idea.
So.
Never thought about that.
Yeah. So then what I took here was I took 75 grams of that starter.
Yeah.
And then I added some more flour, and I added some more water to it.
Oh, to
feed it.
To feed it.
Yeah, this is like feeding time at the zoo. And then I take it and I mix it all up.
And then you have more.
Yeah, and then this is like another batch this is like the same starter.
And then you make more for the next batch.
Yeah, like in maybe 2 days. Or actually, I think I might bake bread this week. So like tomorrow, I'll feed it again in the morning.
Oh, and you throw away part of it.
Yeah, I'll take away everything but 75 grams of it, and I'll feed it another 150 water and 150 flour. And then I'll feed it again at night.
Oh.
Feed it twice, so then it becomes very active. And then in like a day or two, I can just take a little bit of this and I can just make bread with it. And I can save the rest of it, like I don't have to throw it away.
Nice.
So I can always keep it in the fridge.
Good idea. So what is it, like 2 to 1, like 2 tablespoons of flour for 1 tablespoon of water?
For baking the bread or for
No, for the mix. What's
the mix?
Is it 2 to 1?
It's equal parts flour and water.
Oh, it's equal part. Okay.
To make the first starter, it's just equal parts flour and water, and then after that, it's 75 grams of the starter, and then 150 water and 150 flour. So it's like 75.
2 to 1.
Yeah. So you only need a little bit of the starter because it's so concentrated.
Okay.
But it's like super flavorful. And then you just store it either in the fridge or at room temperature with like a towel over it. Like you don't want to put plastic wrap or anything over it because then it kind of like suffocates the yeast. The yeast wants to breathe because it's alive.
So you put something where there's a way to breathe. Okay.
Yeah, so I put like a towel over it so like dust doesn't fall into it, but it can still like breathe and like, because it's releasing carbon dioxide when the yeast eats the sugar in the flour. So it kind of makes it smell like yeasty, kind of like beer.
Like real yeast, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So super cool.
So you
bread baker's secrets.
Yeah. Did you learn that in the bread book?
I learned some of this in culinary school because I had to take a bread baking class, but I learned the most of it when I was reading the Bread Bible by Rose Levy Barnabum, and I learned about how to bake like hearth breads and like traditional rustic breads that they do in like Europe and stuff like that, because it's not like a huge thing in America. It's kind of like a growing trend right now where people want like baked goods and rustic breads and like very high quality baked goods, where before it was like Wonder Bread and white bread. So it's kind of like this new bread revolution.
Yeah.
So it's like
we do have a food revolution right now. Like people are going toward more natural stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Like natural foods and like farm to table and like
that's
very
better
rustic.
for us. Yeah.
Yeah, like less chemicals, like more organic produce, which is super good for us.
Yes. That's good. So this will take a day or two?
Yeah, pretty much in a few hours it'll start to get some bubbles.
Yeah?
Because the yeast is like super happy, it just got...
So you actually can do that a few hours before you bake?
You can, but it takes...
a day?
It takes longer for bread to rise with this kind of starter because it's a slower ferment, which means like the slower that you rise bread and the slower that you bake bread, the more flavor it develops. So like if you bake a bread with like commercial yeast and it only takes you a few hours, your bread doesn't have much flavor and it doesn't have much depth. But if you use a bread starter and you kind of let the bread rise slowly at like a cooler or room temperature versus
It will
like
have a
room
sourdough
temperature.
taste.
Yeah, it'll have a sourdough taste and like it develops like the gluten strands in the bread when you like do stretch and folds. So like the gluten makes the bread have more structure. So you just have like a higher quality product if you take more time to make it. It's kind of like you put all your love into it for a while and then you have like a really amazing product. Where if you rush the process, then it turns out like
It's the same with stew. The slower you cook the stew, the more flavor you get from the vegetables. Yeah.
exactly low and slow is key. Slow
Yeah.
and steady wins the race.
Yes.
So
Yes,
yeah.
definitely makes a difference when you cook a meal for 5 to 8 hours than in half hour.
Yeah, exactly, because it's like everything can like melt together and the flavors get really nice.
And come out of the meat and the
exactly
and everything.
Everything gets nice and happy together. So
That's
yeah,
true.
that's
Yes.
how you do it.
Yeah, flavor takes time actually, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.